For years, people assumed my life was ordinary and predictable, but what they didn't know was that every night I was slowly building something they would never expect. The first time I realized I had already won, nobody else in the room even noticed. That is the strange part about it. For years, I was the guy people described with words like solid or steady. The kind of man you trust to show up on time, fix the printer, or bring the extra folding chairs when nobody else remembers. Not the kind of man you expect to change his life. My name is Daniel Harper. I am 38 years old. If you asked most of the people I grew up with to describe me, they would probably say I was decent, hardworking, quiet, maybe even a little boring. I never argued with that image. It was easier that way. I grew up in a small town in central Ohio, the kind of place where people measure success by how early you settle down and how often you mow your lawn. My dad worked at the same manufacturing plant for 32 years. My mom was a receptionist at a dental office. Stability was the goal. Ambition was something you kept realistic. I was not the smartest kid in school. Not the worst either. I played junior varsity baseball for one season before I realized I was not built for it. I did not talk much in class. I did not chase attention. I blended. In high school, I remember one guidance counselor looking at my file and saying I seemed content. That word stuck with me. Content. Like I was already done growing. After graduation, I did what most of my friends did. I enrolled at the local state college. Business administration. It sounded responsible. I worked part-time at a hardware store, saved what I could, and graduated without any dramatic success story attached to my name. No one ever predicted anything big for me. They did not discourage me either. They just did not see me as the type. And for a while, they were right. I got a job at a regional logistics company when I was 24. Entry-level operations coordinator. It paid enough to rent a small apartment and keep my old Honda Civic running. My coworkers were decent. The work was repetitive. I learned the systems. I kept my head down. In meetings, I spoke only when asked. When promotions came up, louder personalities stepped forward. I watched them argue for raises and new titles while I focused on doing my job well enough that no one complained. At family gatherings, my cousins would talk about big plans. Startups. Moving to Chicago. Getting into real estate. I would stand near the grill with my uncle, flipping burgers, listening to them describe their next big move. When someone eventually asked what I was up to, I would shrug and say, just working. That answer seemed to satisfy everyone. There is a strange freedom in being underestimated. No one tracks your progress. No one competes with you. No one expects a leap. But there is also something else. A quiet pressure. Around my 30th birthday, I started noticing a restlessness in me. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a steady question that would not go away. Is this it? I would sit at my desk after everyone else had left, staring at spreadsheets and shipment schedules, and feel like I was watching my own life pass through a narrow window. Safe. Predictable. Small. One night, after work, I stayed late to help our IT guy fix a reporting glitch. His name was Marcus. He was the opposite of me. Confident. Direct. Always talking about side projects. While we waited for the system to reboot, he mentioned he had been building a small software tool on weekends. Something to automate vendor tracking. He said it casually, like it was nothing. I remember feeling something shift in my chest. He was not smarter than me. Not more experienced. He just tried. That night, I drove home in silence. I sat in my apartment with the lights off and thought about all the times I had dismissed ideas because they felt too ambitious for someone like me. The truth was simple and uncomfortable. I had never actually tested my limits. I had just accepted the version of myself that other people saw, a reliable background character. That weekend, I opened my old laptop and started sketching out an idea I had been quietly thinking about for months. A platform to help small freight brokers optimize route bidding in real time. It sounded technical. It sounded complicated. It also sounded like something I was not supposed to attempt. I told no one. Not my parents. Not my coworkers. Not even Marcus. Every night after work, I sat at my kitchen table and taught myself what I needed to know. I watched tutorials, read forums, made mistakes, started over. My apartment became a quiet workshop no one else could see. During the day, I was still Daniel, the dependable operations guy who never made waves. At night, something else was forming. No one noticed the difference. And that was exactly how I wanted it. But what I did not realize then was that the first real test of whether I would stay invisible was coming sooner than I expected. And when it arrived, It would force me to decide if I was building something for recognition or for myself. The first time someone laughed at my idea, I realized how easy it would have been to quit. It happened about 4 months after I started building the platform. By then, my nights had turned into a second shift. I would get home around 6, heat up something simple, and sit at the kitchen table until after midnight. The glow from my laptop became the only light in the apartment most evenings. I was tired all the time. At work, I was still steady, reliable. Nobody suspected I was running on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. I kept showing up early. I kept finishing reports on time. If anything, I became even more efficient. I needed the routine to protect what I was building. One afternoon, Marcus invited me out for drinks with a few coworkers. I usually skipped those things, but I forced myself to go. I did not want anyone wondering why I kept disappearing after work. At the bar, the conversation drifted toward side hustles. One of the sales guys bragged about flipping sneakers online. Marcus mentioned updating his automation tool. Someone joked about quitting corporate life altogether. I do not know what pushed me, but I casually mentioned I had been experimenting with something related to route optimization. The table got quiet for half a second. Then one of them laughed and said, "Man, that sounds complicated. You sure you want to mess with that?" It was not cruel, just dismissive. Another guy added that freight tech was crowded already. Big players dominated that space. He said it like a warning, but it landed like a ceiling. I shrugged and said it was just a hobby. That word tasted bitter in my mouth. On the drive home, I replayed the conversation over and over. They did not see me as someone who built things. They saw me as the guy who kept operations smooth. Why would I suddenly be anything else? For a moment, I almost closed the laptop that night. But something stubborn in me refused. I told myself I did not need their belief. I needed proof. Quiet proof. So I kept going. I refined the algorithm. I reached out anonymously to 2 small brokers online, offering to let them test the beta for free. One agreed. When his first message came back saying the tool saved him several hours that week, I stared at the screen for a long time. No applause. No witnesses. Just a small crack in the routine that had defined me for years. And that crack was starting to widen. The first real risk I took did not look dramatic from the outside. There were no investors, no loans, no grand announcement. Just a transfer of $8,000 from my savings into a separate business account with a name no one in my life had ever heard before. I had saved that money over years, skipped vacations, drove the same aging Honda long past when most of my coworkers upgraded. That account was my safety net, my proof that I was responsible. Moving that money felt like stepping onto thin ice. By then, 3 small brokers were using the platform in beta. Nothing massive, nothing headline-worthy, but their feedback was consistent. The tool saved time. It reduced missed bids. It simplified things that had always felt chaotic. At work, I continued living my double life. One morning, during a team meeting, our regional manager announced a restructuring plan. Departments would be consolidated. Some roles might shift. He used calm language, but the message was clear. Nothing was guaranteed. Around the conference table, people tensed. A few started asking pointed questions about job security. I sat there quietly, nodding, taking notes. Inside, something unexpected happened. I did not feel panic. For the first time in my adult life, the idea of losing my job did not terrify me. It unsettled me, sure. But underneath that, there was something else. Confidence. Not loud. Not reckless. Just a steady sense that I was not as dependent as I used to be. That realization almost scared me more than the restructuring announcement. Later that week, my mom called. She asked how work was going. I told her it was fine. She reminded me how lucky I was to have stability in uncertain times. She said people would give anything for a safe position like mine. I agreed with her. I did not mention the late nights, the growing user base, the small but steady subscription payments that had started hitting the business account. That same weekend, one of the brokers asked if I offered a premium version with expanded analytics. I had not planned on charging more yet. I had not even told myself this was a real business. But I said yes. Then I spent 48 hours building the feature. When the upgraded payment cleared, I stared at the notification longer than I probably should have. It was not life-changing money, but it was proof. Proof that something I built in silence had value. And still, I told no one. Because the moment you speak something aloud, people start forming opinions about it. And I was not ready for anyone else's opinion to shape what I was building. The first time someone tried to buy it from me, I almost said yes out of fear. By then, the platform had grown to 11 paying users. Still small, still fragile, but steady. Word traveled quietly in that industry. Small brokers talk to each other. If something saves time, it spreads. I kept refining the system after work, answering support emails during lunch breaks, pretending I was just catching up on news when coworkers walked by. One Tuesday afternoon, I received an email from a mid-sized logistics firm in Indiana. The owner said one of his contractors had been using my tool and recommended it. He wanted a demo. My hands actually shook during that first video call. I had never pitched anything in my life. On screen, he looked relaxed, confident, the kind of man who had built something real. He asked direct questions about scalability, data security, long-term plans. Questions I had only half-formed answers for. At the end of the call, he leaned back and said he liked the concept, said there was potential. Then he asked if I had ever considered selling the software outright. The question caught me off guard. He floated a number. Not massive, not retirement-level money, but more than I had ever seen offered in a single sentence. For a few seconds, I pictured it. Accepting the deal. Walking away. Returning to my predictable life with a padded savings account and a quiet story I would never tell. Safe. That word again. I told him I needed time to think. That night, I sat in my dark apartment, staring at the ceiling. Selling would have been easy. It would have proven that I was capable of building something valuable. It would have given me external validation. But it also would have ended the growth before I even saw how far it could go. I realized something uncomfortable. If I sold now, it would not be because it was the smartest move. It would be because I was afraid to fully step into something bigger. The next morning, I emailed him back and declined the offer. I framed it professionally, said I was focused on long-term development. The truth was simpler. I wanted to see what I could build without anyone else's permission. And that decision quietly changed the trajectory of my life. Success did not arrive like fireworks. It arrived like pressure. By year 2, the platform had grown to just over 40 consistent clients. Nothing flashy. Mostly small to mid-sized freight brokers who needed efficiency more than prestige. Monthly revenue quietly crossed a number I had once considered impossible. It still did not feel real. I was now making nearly as much from the platform as I was from my full-time job. And that was when things became dangerous. At work, the restructuring finally hit my department. 2 positions were eliminated. Responsibilities were shuffled. I was called into my manager's office and offered a promotion. Operations manager. Higher salary. Bigger bonus structure. More responsibility. More meetings. More visibility. Everyone congratulated me. My parents were thrilled when I told them. My dad said he always knew hard work paid off. My mom told my aunt before I even made it home that night. I smiled. I accepted. I acted grateful. Inside, I felt trapped. The promotion meant longer hours. More oversight. Less time for the platform. For the first time, the 2 lives I had built started colliding. For several months, I tried to maintain both. I woke up at 5 in the morning to code before work. I answered client emails from my car during lunch. I stayed up past midnight more nights than I should admit. Exhaustion crept in quietly. One evening, I fell asleep at my desk with my laptop still open. I woke up at 2 in the morning, neck stiff, screen glowing with unread support tickets. For the first time, I questioned whether I was stretching myself too thin. Then something happened I did not expect. A larger brokerage firm signed up for a trial. They were 10 times bigger than my average client. If they converted to a paid contract, it would push monthly revenue well beyond my corporate salary. The trial went well. Then their operations director requested a call. During that call, he told me they were impressed. He asked if I had a team behind the software. I hesitated. No, I said. It is just me. There was a long pause. He said they would move forward, but they needed assurances about scalability and support. When the contract came through, I sat staring at the numbers. If they stayed on for 6 months, I would officially be earning more from my quiet project than from the job everyone congratulated me for. And that was when the real decision started forming in my mind. Because if I stepped away from my job, people would ask questions, and I was not sure I was ready to answer them. I did not quit on a dramatic day. No argument. No breakdown. No speech about chasing dreams. I submitted my resignation on a quiet Thursday morning in early March. The night before, I ran the numbers one last time. Recurring revenue had held steady for 8 months. The larger brokerage had renewed. Two additional mid-sized firms signed annual contracts. After taxes and operating costs, I was earning more than my corporate salary. Not by a ridiculous margin, but enough. Still, I did not feel triumphant. I felt calm. That surprised me. When I walked into my manager's office, he looked concerned. He assumed I had received a better offer somewhere else. He asked which company, what title, what compensation package. I told him I was stepping away to pursue something independent. He blinked. He asked what industry. I kept it vague. Said it was software related. Something small. He nodded slowly, the way people do when they think you are making a risky mistake. Human Resources scheduled an exit interview. They asked if compensation had been an issue, if management support had been lacking. I told them no. The company had treated me fairly, which was true. I simply no longer belonged there. Word spread quickly through the office. Coworkers stopped by my desk over the next 2 weeks. Some were genuinely curious. Others were politely skeptical. One guy pulled me aside and said he hoped I had a backup plan. Another joked that I would be back in 6 months asking for my old job. I smiled at all of them. I did not correct anyone. My parents took it harder than I expected. When I told them over dinner, my mom's face tightened. She asked why I would leave a stable management role. My dad asked if this was temporary. I told them I had been planning it for a while. They asked why I had not mentioned it before. I did not have a simple answer for that. Because the truth was, I had built something without needing their belief in it. And I wanted to keep it that way. On my last day, I packed my desk into a cardboard box. A few framed photos. A coffee mug. Some notebooks filled with shipment metrics that no longer mattered to me. As I walked out of the building, there was no applause. No dramatic music playing in my head. Just a quiet understanding. For years, I had been the reliable one. The safe one. Now I was stepping into something uncertain. And no one around me had any idea how solid that uncertainty actually was. The strange thing about full commitment is how quickly momentum shifts. For the first few weeks after leaving my job, I woke up automatically at 5 in the morning, heart racing, convinced I had overslept for work. Then I would remember. There was no office to report to. No manager waiting on updates. Just me. And the platform. Without the daily drain of corporate responsibilities, my focus sharpened. I rebuilt the user interface. Streamlined onboarding. Hired a freelance developer for back-end optimization, paying him quietly from the business account like it was the most normal thing in the world. Revenue climbed steadily. Not explosively, just consistently. 3 months in, I crossed a number that forced me to sit back in my chair and breathe. I was earning more in 1 month than I used to earn in a quarter. I did not celebrate. Instead, I reinvested. Better servers. Legal protections. An accountant. Meanwhile, my life on the outside looked almost unchanged. I still drove the same Honda. I still rented the same modest apartment. When neighbors asked how work was going, I told them I was freelancing in software. That answer seemed to bore them enough to avoid follow-up questions. At a family barbecue that summer, my cousin Ethan talked loudly about his new real estate venture. Another cousin bragged about cryptocurrency gains. They compared risks like trophies. Someone eventually asked what I was doing since leaving my job. I shrugged and said I was working on a small tech project. They nodded politely, then returned to discussing property values. I let them. There was a quiet power in not correcting anyone. Around that same time, a regional trade publication featured an article about emerging tools in freight optimization. My platform was mentioned in the 3rd paragraph. Not by my name, just the company name. I stared at that article longer than I want to admit. For a moment, I considered sharing it, posting it, letting people connect the dots. Instead, I closed the browser. The recognition felt good, but I realized something important. The work felt better. Not the applause, not the validation, the actual building. That was when I understood I was no longer chasing proof for anyone else. I was building because I wanted to see how far it could go. And it was going farther than anyone around me suspected. The first time someone from my old office reached out, I felt a flicker of something I had not felt in a while. Validation. Marcus sent me a message one evening. He said he had come across a freight optimization tool his new company was considering. He sent the link casually, asking if I had heard of it. It was mine. For a moment, I just stared at the message. He had no idea. I typed 3 different responses before settling on something neutral. I said I had seen similar platforms gaining traction. Asked what he thought of it. He replied that it looked promising. Said if the pricing made sense, they might move forward. There it was. An opportunity to reveal everything. To say, "I built that." To watch his reaction shift from mild curiosity to shock. Instead, I kept the conversation technical, detached. A week later, his company signed up for a trial. I watched their account activate from my dashboard, seeing his name listed under operations review. He still did not know. At the same time, my revenue crossed another milestone. A clean, undeniable number. One that officially placed my annual income well beyond what anyone in my immediate circle was making. I expected the number to feel explosive. It did not. It felt steady, grounded, earned. That weekend, I visited my parents. My dad asked if I had thought about going back to a traditional company for stability. He said entrepreneurship was unpredictable. He meant well. I nodded and told him things were fine. He did not ask for details. He assumed fine meant surviving. Later that evening, my cousin Ethan complained about how hard it was to break into 7 figures in real estate. He said it like it was a universal benchmark everyone chased. I sipped my drink and listened. They talked about ambition as if it had to be loud, as if success required an audience. I realized something sitting there in that backyard. If I told them the truth, the dynamic would shift instantly. Questions would come. Comparisons. Expectations. Maybe even resentment. Right now, I was free. Free from their projections. Free from their measuring sticks. And for the first time in my life, I understood that not every achievement needs witnesses to be real. But there was still one moment left that would test whether I truly believed that. The real test came on a random Tuesday afternoon. I received an email from the same mid-sized logistics firm that had once tried to buy my platform early on. This time, the message was different. They were expanding. Rapidly. They wanted to discuss a partnership. The numbers attached to the proposal were no longer modest. If I agreed, the deal would not just increase revenue. It would multiply it. It would push my company into a completely different tier of visibility. Industry conferences, public announcements, press releases with my name attached. The kind of growth that forces you into the spotlight whether you want it or not. We scheduled a call. On screen, their executive team spoke confidently about scaling, about branding, about positioning me as a founder in a growing niche market. They asked about interviews, media coverage, speaking engagements. As they talked, I felt something tighten in my chest. For years, I had built in silence. Every step forward had been private, controlled, mine. Now they were offering acceleration. But acceleration came with exposure. After the call, I walked outside and sat in my car for a long time. Not because I was unsure about the money. The money made sense. The growth made sense. The question was different. Did I want to become known for this? Not financially known, personally known. Because once people attach your face to success, they treat you differently. They measure you differently. They expect you to maintain it. I thought about my parents, about Marcus, about my cousins who love to compare milestones like they were scoreboard points. I imagined the questions, the surprise, the subtle shifts in tone, and I realized something that surprised even me. I did not need them to see it. That night, I emailed the firm back. I agreed to expand the partnership, but I declined public branding. No interviews, no spotlight. The company would grow under its name, not mine. They pushed back at first, said visibility was powerful. I responded calmly. The product would speak for itself. In the end, they agreed. The deal went through. Revenue surged again. Stability deepened. My future became something I once only imagined. And still, to most people around me, I remained Daniel. Dependable, quiet, average. Only now, I knew exactly what that image protected. And I was finally ready to understand why I had chosen it all along. The final realization did not come with a contract or a milestone. It came on an ordinary Sunday morning. I was sitting on the balcony of the same modest apartment, coffee in hand, watching the street below wake up. A delivery truck rolled by. A neighbor walked his dog. Nothing about the scene suggested anything extraordinary. My laptop sat open on the small outdoor table beside me. On the screen, the dashboard showed numbers that once felt impossible. Stable, growing, secure. For the first time, I allowed myself to calculate it fully. Financial independence. Not in theory. Not in potential. Real. I could stop working tomorrow and be fine for years. The business could run with the small team I had quietly assembled. The systems were solid. The client base steady. And no one outside a small professional circle knew the scale of it. Later that afternoon, I met a few old coworkers for coffee. Marcus was there. He talked about company politics. Deadlines. Office restructuring. He mentioned the freight tool his company now relied on and joked that whoever built it must be doing well. I smiled and said it seemed well designed. He nodded, unaware. There was no bitterness in me. No need to correct him. Just calm. That evening, my parents called. My mom asked if I was still getting by with my freelance work. My dad reminded me that long-term security mattered more than quick wins. I told them I was comfortable. That word again. Content. Only this time, it meant something different. I had built the version of the future I once imagined sitting in a dark apartment years ago. Not flashy, not loud, but mine. I understood now why I never announced it. Because when you chase recognition, your success belongs partly to the audience. It lives in their reactions, their approval, their surprise. What I built felt more solid because it existed without those things. It was not fragile. It did not depend on applause. That night, I closed my laptop and turned off the lights. The room was quiet. No headlines. No celebrations. Just the steady awareness that I had outgrown the version of myself everyone assumed I would remain. And the best part was this. I did not need to tell anyone. Because success, when it is truly yours, feels most real when it is simply lived.